And welcome to this video in the series Lyric German Latin Diction. In the previous videos, we took a look at lyric diction more generally. We looked at the intersection between music, vocalism, and diction, and then we looked a little bit more at the different varieties of Latin pronunciation and where those came about, and some general practices for when we're going to be singing Latin where we're going to be singing Latin in our music, and what we can do to make our German Latin sound sehr deutsch. So, hello and welcome to this next video in the series Lyric German Latin Diction. In the previous videos, we took a look at lyric diction more generally. We looked a little bit at the intersection between musicality, vocalism, and diction, and then we took a little bit of a look at the different varieties of Latin pronunciation and how we come to start making decisions about which characteristics are brought over when we approach Latin in singing. And in this video, we're going to really get into the nitty-gritty of how we're going to be approaching Latin and singing it in with German pronunciation, and what are the characteristics that we're going to be bringing over. Like I mentioned, a lot of the decisions made were based off of the book in the previous video by Vera Scher, but also I spent quite a bit of time going around Germany to different places and listening to how Latin is done in the different churches and schools, in concerts, and things like that. And the approach that we're taking is one that is meant to have the most clarity and in terms of comprehension of the listener, also one that is healthy for singing and conducive to healthy singing, and also one that works very well with the music. And much of my practical training on singing Latin diction was in Stuttgart, and that's really where I got my first experiences, and I found over time that those approaches seem to work best, like I said, with vocalism and the music. There are other varieties, so if you've done something slightly differently in the past, that's totally cool. And if you want to share about that and talk with me about it, I'd love to hear about it. And what we're going to be doing here and covering here is so that we as a group can approach this music and this text in a unified way and really come up with a great interpretation. Ideally, the music is the focus, and the diction and our vocalism are being used to serve the music. And again, that's one of the reasons I really like working with Daniel. But again, we're going to be using these approaches, and so why don't we just dive in? All right, so let's just review quickly the characteristics of German pronunciation that we're going to want to take over. So long versus short vowels, open versus closed, and this next one, I think the consonants are the thing that give it the most distinction from the other varieties of Latin that you might, or Latin pronunciation that you've done. Just, if you think about singing in Italian or French versus singing in German, the consonants are different. So, even when you're singing the same Latin piece, if you're singing it with a German intention, it's going to have a totally different feel, just viscerally. And part of that is because of the approach to the consonants. The other part of this is word separation, and so a lot of times we hear the word glottals, or someone will use the word glottal. That's a linguistic term, and obviously the exact function of that was not something that we would use when singing. It's a harsh it's a harsh gesture. So word separation, and as a reminder, that's for when we have words that start with a vowel, that there is a separation. There is a separation from the word that precedes it. With the weak syllables, in German we talk about the schwa pretty often, and the schwa has a few sounds that are okay to do, okay to sing when we're singing in German. There are syllables that would be totally thrown away in the spoken language, but we have to figure out something to do with them in the sung language. And so understanding how to make that navigation navigate those sounds and those transitions is super important, because also we want to, even though they're weak linguistically, they need to be supported vocally. And in Latin, when we're approaching Latin with a German flavor, there's a lot more weak syllables, and so that does affect the melody of the language, but we also need to be aware of that so that everything is supported and we sing with great line. All right, so moving on. So how are we going to do our German-Latin enrichment? I thought it'd be helpful if we looked at a few texts together, went over them in detail, and I know everyone has different backgrounds and experiences, so some of it might not be super relevant, but what I'm hoping to do is present a condensed overview of all the main points and the major qualities, and I don't want to say different, there are differences. So the major differences from what maybe you've done in the past versus how we approach with German. And at the end, for those of you who already have experience with this, you should be able to transmit and all of that to the other parts of the text, but also I'll be creating materials for each of the choruses, and if any of the soloists would like help with their text, I'm more than happy to do that. So the approach here is to do a deep dive into these little texts with the hope that the larger concepts can be transferred over to the rest of the text. So here we go. Gloria in excelsis Deo. Let's take a look at that IPA real quick. So, Gloria in excelsis Deo. Now, first thing I'd like to actually bring up is this L. And the German L is a little more forward than the Italian L, and most definitely more than the English L. So the L in German is made by placing the tongue between the teeth, not behind the top teeth, but between the teeth. Gloria. Obviously, you're not going to be sticking out your tongue while you're singing, but the position of the tongue is there. And you'll also notice that with that positioning of the L, the O has a very vibrant, round, full quality. Gloria in excelsis Deo. The next thing we notice after this ria is this next word. The second word is in, not in, but in, and then we have a whole bunch of consonants. Excelsis Deo. The reason that we can break this up into EX and then CEL. And C, when we're approaching these C words, and when we have the consonant C, or the spelled consonant C, followed by a forward vowel, meaning written E, written A, a written I, a written E, and then also the O umlaut, or OE. So we're going to see that later, but excelsis. And if you have trouble with all of these four consonants in a row, just break it up. X, 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 Excel, 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 Excel. So there are a lot of words like this, and yeah, that's how you can start breaking them up. And it's also important to note that you do sing this about 50 some odd times, or I don't know how many dozens of times, but we sing this a whole bunch of times. And so obviously, you don't want to kill yourself if it's in difficult areas, and it's not important that it be so defined every time. But there are places where we want to make sure it's clear, and then we want to give ourselves a little break when it's not as important. Going on in this word, you'll also notice that this final syllable, sis, it's not sis, but sis. Gloria in excelsis Deo. And so that's another thing. A lot of these written final syllables are totally weak. So is, es, us. We'll see more of them, but that's another one of the major differences, is that we have these more open vowels for these final weak syllables. It is okay to close it a little bit, but we really want to try to maintain this sense of a weak syllable with an open I. And then similarly with this last word on that on the final syllable, it is closed, but it's also weak, and so it might have a slightly different quality than the other O, as in Gloria, Dio, Dio. It's the same sound, slightly different quality, because it's weak. So that's a lot for just this one line, but I think there's a lot of great stuff in here. So let's move on. So here's another thing that's a little bit different. So we have Qui tollis peccata mundi, Qui tollis peccata mundi. And let's take a look. So this first word, whenever we have the QU, it's going to be kv. And what I've noticed is, because this is one of the more significant distinctions between German versus Italianate or Church Latin, it tends to get overdone. This is a know-nothing syllable. All of these kvs are really, they're not expressive. As fun as the v is to sing and satisfying, it's one of my favorite sounds to sing. It's not important. So it's not qui tollis, but qui tollis peccata mundi. Again, we have in that second word, we have a nice open all, and we see again that weak syllable, is. And then going on, peccata mundi. And so it's not mundi, but mundi. And we are going to probably close this just a little bit, because we have to sing it and sustain it for so long that mundi isn't going to sound terribly good. But that is one of those distinctions. So, qui tollis peccata mundi, miserere nobis, miserere nobis. So, you might hear this done differently in different recordings, and that's because in this first word, there's there's two main weak syllables, there's two weak syllables there, and that the second syllable and the final syllable, miserere. And so what we're going to do is, like we did earlier, we're going to use these sounds to guide. We're going to use the sounds around to guide all of these weak syllables. So we have miserere. I think that's a good approach to go towards. It'll be more on the closed side here. Nobis. Again, we have that open I. So, all right. And then we have again Qui tollis peccata mundi. You can have fun with that. Suscipe deprecationem nostram. Suscipe. Suscipe. Okay, so how did we get there? So let's break up this word. So the first syllable is sus. 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 Susci. Susci. And a lot of people have trouble with this consonant combination. I remember exactly where I was when I was having difficulty. I was in front of a group of people and I didn't know that we were supposed to be singing in German Latin, and I got schooled. So, and luckily, very, very helpful teacher. But susci, susci, suscipe. If you need to break it up. And then going on, deprecationem nostram. We see this on the second word here, that final syllable, more like onem nostram. All right. Next we have gratias agimus tibi. Gratias agimus tibi. So let's take a look. So we see here, I think the biggest thing you'll notice is that all the G's are pronounced G. Gratias agimus tibi. Agimos. So anytime we have the written G, it is going to be this G sound. We'll see that again here. Propter magnam gloriam tuam. Propter magnam gloriam tuam. Gloriam tuam. So we have this in this first word. We have that throwaway syllable propter. Propter magnam. 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 And if you are singing some solo and it is heavily orchestrated, can't think of, anyway, you can, in these instances where it's magnam, change it to a slight K. It's not great, but G can sometimes get lost, so that's just something to be aware of in this instance. Magnam, wouldn't be great to be machnam, not a hard K, but magnam, magnam. Kind of this in between is fine. Anyway, that's kind of advanced. Don't. Magnam gloriam tuam. Great. So then we have our opening line. Like with miserere, probably notice is that a lot of times we all move to the stressed syllable, and that's the most close. This first syllable is ü. The Y in German is ü. Again, if you sang the Cypress Tree, Zypressen. Actually, that's short, but Elysium. If you've sung Beethoven's Ninth, Elysium. Kyrie eleison. Kyrie eleison. And then let's go on. Credo in unum Deum. So here, this is great because we have the nice closed E sound, O, and then we have a whole bunch of vowels. So this is an example where, we're not going to want to use a super strong separation, but it does need to be there. Credo in unum. Credo in unum Deum. In unum Deum. In one God. And so German, this is one of those great places where, we could never go credo in unum. I don't know what Daniel will want to do, but this is just an example of one of those places where it's interesting to note the linguistic aspects and the musical ones together, where it works in conjunction. Where in Italian, in unum, in unum, in unum, it would kind of lose that, and you might have to do that you might have to accent the unum in a different way. Anyway, so that's all great. I also wanted to show the unum as having the two different types of U sounds, one being the long and closed, the other being the short and open, as part of the final weak syllable. And same with dium, we start seeing those syllables. And then same here, factorem coelietere, factorem coelietere. So here we have this is factorem. Again, you're going to want to enjoy those when it's important, and then kind of minimize them after, or when it's vocally challenging. This next one, zöli. So this is that the schön, if you the schön sound. Coelietere. Visibilium omnium. The reason I put this in parentheses, again, this is a really weak syllable. It should probably be just visibili in spoken. It would be thrown away. It's one of those decisions where we're going to be making it more e. Visibilium omnium. Visibilium omnium. Or whatever your line is. Great, and so those are the main texts that I wanted to go over. I think it's also important, so one of the things that sometimes comes up is, our initial S's supposed to be Z, our initial V is supposed to be F, Fisibili, those sorts of things. With the S's, we're going to stick to S, so it's going to be sanctus, not zanctus. And then the written V's are still going to be V and not F. I'm trying to think of any other initial consonants like that where there is some discrepancy. I've only heard people do zanctus in like super remote areas. I haven't really heard that done with any professional groups in a quite a long time. It's not to say that it doesn't happen, but again, just also to go with the character, I think sanctus is plenty Deutsch. And yeah, so like I said, I'm going to go through the rest of the texts individually, and we'll cover that. But I hope this gave a good overview and enough information so that any of the concepts can really be transferred to the others without too much difficulty. Of course, let me know if you have any questions. I'm happy to talk with any and all of you about all of this fun stuff. Love it. Yeah, all right. Thank you so much.